Welcome to the Gender in Focus podcast. I'm Elle, and each week I get to ask Kai Scott, the president of Transfocus Consulting, all the questions you have ever wanted to ask about trans and non-binary people in the workplace and in the wider world.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks, but language changes all the time. It's constantly changing. And so right when you think you've got a handle on, the way to talk about things, it's going to shift again because let's face it, humans are creative and wonderful, and we're always finding new ways to, branch out into new ways of speaking. And it's fascinating, but it does mean that we're in a state of constant learning.
Today we're joined by Keely Kidner, the Equity and Inclusion Advisor at the District of Squamish. The district has been undertaking the deep and steady work of change on gender diversity over the last few years. And together we explore how inclusion shows up in culture through education that builds an understanding, empathy, and confidence, and also in structures through strategy sessions that shape the spaces and systems people interact with every day. We'll talk about what it looks like to move from good intentions to tangible progress and the surprising lessons along the way. So, welcome, Keely. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's so great to be chatting with you, Kai. It's a rainy day, but I love talking about this stuff. And I'm all cozy here at my home office.
Excellent. That's good. We're out of the rain. That's the important part.
Yeah.
Please share a little bit about yourself and what you do at the district, and anything you want to share about yourself personally as well.
Yeah. So my name's Keely. My pronouns are she, they. I have been living in Squamish for 10 years. Before that time, I was born and grew up on the unceded territory of Sayets people in Penticton in the Okanagan in the interior. And the work that I do at the District of Squamish is interesting because I came out of academia originally. So I completed my PhD over in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in sociolinguistics. So I'm a language guy. I think language is very important, and a social scientist like yourself. And I've kind of come into municipal government work, and it's been really interesting because I found a lot of really great applications for making a difference in my community in a really tangible way. So the work I do at the District of Squamish, I am the IDEA department, which stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility.
Oh, wow.
And the way I phrase it to my kids is that I help people care about other people. So trying to build all of that into all the work that we do in a systemic way. And I should just let folks know that I also am deaf. Over the last, I think probably 15, 20 years, I've lost my hearing, which has been a really interesting journey as well. So I make copious use of all of those fun accessibility things like captions and hearing loops and things like that. I approach everything with that kind of, perspective as well.
Right. Yeah, that intersectional lens is so key because there are, of course, so many unique needs, and they all deserve their attention, consideration, and inclusion. So it's always so important to have as many people around the table as possible, and folks who have those overlapping experiences can really shed light on some really powerful things. So it's always really good to, and thank you for sharing that too, because there's oftentimes even, multiple invisibilities, and just shedding light on those is really key. Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to talk to you today because you yourself, along with the district, are doing such an important work, and it's really important to share that with others who are perhaps on their own inclusion journey, and so to share the insights and the progress along the way, and perhaps surprising discoveries. And so that's why I thought it'd be really important for folks to hear what's happening. And so the first question I have is just, thinking about the cultural dimension of this type of work. It's all about what kinds of perceptions people have and understandings of trans and non-binary folks. Uh, In certain settings we've seen, not at the district, but there is this kind of one and done, especially when it comes to education or training of staff. And so I've observed with the district, you have a very different approach to that. And so I'm just curious to hear about, how did that learning on gender diversity become a part of the broader cultural shift rather than just being like a one-time checkbox exercise?
Yeah, it's very tempting, isn't it, to say, okay, we've done that, let's let's move on. But we know that when we're looking at systemic cultural change, you can't just do, one thing and check the box. We hear a lot about check boxes and how
Mhm.
it's not appropriate. I think I think for us, the big thing was just generally like this is not the only thing we did. Like we didn't just do a training session.
Right.
Even within the training sessions, like we always knew that there would be another step to them,
Mm.
because like at Transfocus, you've got it really set up in a great format where you got gender diversity introduction, where you get
Right.
people kind of on the same page, and then moving into intermediate. And so we always knew that we would want to kind of continue the conversation and the
Mm.
education for folks, and we had budget.
Right.
So we
That's
made sure
helpful.
that we had budget for this, and just really kind of bringing people along on that journey. Um, and I think the training piece was just like one piece of all the other things that we did. So
Right.
another thing that we really thought about was bringing joy to the work. I think that it's so important because we spend a lot of time talking about the challenges and the barriers, which
Yeah.
are important to investigate,
Mhm.
but that's not all there is. There's a lot of fun to be had in just supporting people to be themselves.
Right.
I think that the queer community in general is just such a wonderful, joyful place.
Mm.
So we really try to embrace that. We've been raising the pride flag for almost a decade, I would say,
Oh, wow.
at Muni Hall.
Okay.
And in the last probably 5 or so years, we've tried to make it a really joyful sort of celebration. So I get rainbow cupcakes for
Hey.
everybody. We have music.
Mm.
The community comes out, staff join in, and it's just a really fun time where everyone is just celebrating. And so it's important to have that happening too.
Mm.
Um, and then we also have been, again, for the last probably 4 years, we've been doing a District of Squamish Pride Week celebration for our staff. So the idea is that we want to recognize and celebrate our staff who are part of the 2S LGBTQI plus community, whether
Mm.
they're out at work or not. Like we know they're there.
Right.
And so it's basically just getting a whole bunch of fun swag and giving it out to all the different departments, and people get to decorate.
Mhm.
People get like little bracelets and temporary tattoos and pins. Enamel pins are a big hit. And
Okay.
just people can kind of choose their own adventure and decide, how much they want to be loud and proud or support. We've got lots of like allyship pins, which are a big hit too.
Hmm.
And that has grown. It started off a week and then it was a month,
Oh.
and now what are we're recording right now in November and people still have decorations up from June.
Oh,
So
wow.
uh, I'm just kind of like, you know what, we'll just let people continue to show their support
Yep.
and recognize that not everyone is going to be that way, right? Not everyone's going to need to show their support in that way, and that's
Mm.
okay. Which was another big learning for us too, that including a diversity of voices in the planning of this.
Mm.
I give a shout out to, my introverted colleagues who helped me plan this, because they're thinking about, hey, what are some of the other ways that people can engage with this, and just having these quiet, contemplative
Mm.
spaces for people too, and resources for them. So just trying to kind of give people a whole variety of ways to learn about and show support for the 2S LGBTK plus community.
Mm.
Um, we also had our inaugural Pride Parade this year in
Ooh.
Squamish, which was
Okay.
very
Excellent.
exciting.
Huh.
Yeah. So we got a float together. We did some really beautiful decorations, and just the staff that have like come out and joined in on this and been really celebratory has really created that shift as well.
Mm.
Um, One thing I will say too is we're very lucky that we have a lot of good leadership support. So our mayor
Right.
and council um, have attended these events. Our leadership, they share their personal stories. So just, yeah, creating a sort of like all encompassing, it's showing up everywhere, not just in the training sessions, but like
Mhm.
the joyful celebratory events as well. And I think that's all combined to create a cultural shift, because we've created this like sense of, hey, let's do this, it's fun and exciting and people want to join in. But
Mhm.
then we also bring them along with that education if they're like not quite sure
Yeah.
how to do it or like what things mean. Making sure that we're supporting people in that way so everyone can join in and have part of the fun. So yeah, it's kind of a whole bag of things that we've been
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah. Holy smokes. That's really impressive. And it speaks to the kind of sustained effort to bring people along when they're ready, and with the different options available for types of participation that can connect with them, who they are, right, and how they like to receive information. And of course, leadership participation really sends that signal from the top. This is an important topic, and it connects to them personally, and so that it's this integrated thing rather than kind of aside or one time, and so it really can kind of grow in an organic way. So I think that's fantastic. And you can always win, or not win people, but just bring people along when you have food involved as well, I find. So the
Yes.
cupcakes were spot on. Good idea. And also something tangible like pins, or, kind of those visible signs can
Mm.
be really important as well. And, again, like you said, nobody's forced to, they don't have to, but if they feel inspired to, because they kind of brought into this and kind of gravitate towards this, then they're invited to participate in that way. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. And joy, especially when perhaps it's a bit darker these days, particularly on trans and non-binary issues. I think that's
Mm.
really important not to lose sight of, because while we can address those things, the joy is always there and carries us too in these times, right? So that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm trying to also think too. Of course, there's the joy and the celebration, but there are moments of discomfort as well when it comes to understanding issues that might be a bit more difficult for people to wrap their heads around. And so I'm just wanting to see if you have a moment when somebody's kind of assumption or how they perceived gender was perhaps challenged by what is happening at the district, or maybe even a story from your own personal experience, and kind of what helped them move forward or through that discomfort.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to recognize that there's a lot of change happening for folks, and
Mm.
um, they're having to sort of think about what they were told or taught growing up and maybe have to unlearn some of that stuff.
Mm.
And I know as a trans person who's gone through this process too, like
Sure.
I understand it. It's confusing and it can be really unsettling. So I think, just treating that situation with patience is a big thing. In terms of like specific instances or topics that have been challenging, I know some folks have struggled to get their heads around pronouns, especially singular they.
Yes.
So someone who's using they them pronouns. And honestly, having a PhD in linguistics has helped me with that
Ooh,
because I can
okay.
just say, listen, it's grammatical.
Right. Right.
You have it from a linguist. If anyone tells you it's not, send them to me.
Right. Right.
So drawing on those sorts of things. But I have shared with folks my own sort of things that I've tricks and tips that I've learned. If you have a pet, practice pretending that they use they them pronouns, and
Oh,
it's
that's
just
so cute.
practice, right? Getting used to it.
Yeah.
um we've had yeah, I think honestly the big thing is the fear of saying or doing the wrong thing, and
Yep.
just assuring people that if that happens, like it's okay, we're all learning. So
Mm,
creating that psychological safety in the organization where people feel okay to take a risk or try something new, and if they make a mistake or step in it, they're not going to get
mm,
kicked out of the organization or kicked out of a team. They're going to be gently supported in that learning and trying to get better, because we all start from somewhere, right?
yeah.
um, I think another big challenge for people to wrap their heads around is spaces. So gendered spaces,
Mm,
washrooms, and change rooms.
yeah.
Um, and those structural changes can feel really, really scary for folks.
Mm,
So again, just being able to hear people, hear their concerns,
mm,
understand, um, and we use a calling in approach. It's really deliberate what we
right.
do at the organization instead of calling out. So we're calling in and bringing people in to the fold and sort of inviting them in,
Mm,
and again creating that psychological safety where they can try new things. um, Another way that we help bring folks along is we connect to community. So
mm,
we have a wonderful Pride Squamish community here, and have been building really good relationships with them. And bringing them in to speak to staff about their experiences of growing up or living in Squamish, what it's like, what it's been like,
mm,
what's changed for them. And a lot of the changes for the better, because that's something we don't always talk about, is how
right.
things have gotten better.
Mhm,
And just recognizing that many of us are also part of the queer community, either personally or we have family members. A lot of our
mm,
colleagues have family members who are part of the 2S LGBTQA plus community. So
mhm,
recognizing that, and that there's space for them to do that support work. I think one thing that we're trying to remember is that we're supporting people not just to support everyone at work. We're supporting people to
mm,
help them cope with all these changes happening in society around them, the
mm,
movement forward, especially with young people and their
mm,
family members. So I like to think that they're gonna learn some of this stuff at work and then be able to better relate to their kids or their kids' friends, or feel more confident in
mm,
that. So that's kind of how we approach some of that discomfort. And I
mm,
think just the number one thing is avoiding shaming people, because as soon as you bring
mm.
shame into it, it just shuts everything down. And so
Yeah.
finding ways to do that with learning about conflict resolution, holding space for folks as needed, um, yeah, and just being there for them as they learn. You're not going to get everybody on board, and that's
Mm,
okay. But there's a lot of people that, like I said, want to join in on the fun because they see we're having fun, um, and being able to support them in that in a patient way. Yeah.
mhm. Ah, that's so true. That people can have a high degree of hesitation on this topic and can hold back, or gingerly try something new, and then if they don't have a positive learning experience, they can recoil. As in, is a kind of a human response to most new things, right? It's not unique to trans and non-binary folks or issues. And so in a way that you all have each other's back in terms of helping each other move forward, I think is a really positive way to build people's competence, slowly and gradually, to where it's like, oh, why was that such a big thing, right? And but it's a
Yeah.
process for sure, and those moments of discomfort, rather than being something uh, kind of, yeah, awful, they can be actually a part of a learning process for folks. So that's really exciting to hear, and that you've thought that through at the district level. But of course, you're right; it ripples far outside of the district walls, and into the community, society more generally, because we're all a part of families and friendship circles and volunteer at community events and whatnot. So these types of things, while useful within the workplace, translate into everyday interactions as well. Um, and certainly, this is an important thing. We do find that people get stuck at, my mistakes will hurt trans people, and then kind of don't. It's hard to get the courage to get beyond that. But it's a very important one, and one where there's usually a lot of space among trans and non-binary folks to learn and to advance on various everyday interactions. So, and speaking of everyday actions, especially around allyship, I wondered if you have any other, you certainly have, especially around pronouns. We were just mentioning that can be a challenge for folks, but what are some of those practical ways, in addition to what you've already mentioned, that you've noticed staff doing as they relate to one another, especially those kind of everyday water cooler discussions or things that happen in meetings and whatnot?
Yeah, I think pronouns is a big shift that has happened.
Mm.
Um, a lot of staff, include pronouns on their email exchange, and and even in person, we've been noticing in meetings, so people will introduce themselves and share their pronouns, and it's really exciting to see that happen. And of course, it's not obligatory. we
Yeah.
don't we don't force anyone to do that. We just say, if you want to, this is something you can do, because we want to make it safe for people, including trans and non-binary folks who don't feel
Yeah.
comfortable sharing their pronouns. But it's been really interesting, because one thing that we've noticed as staff members is that, of course, at a municipality, you have some fairly formal meetings happening
Mm.
in council chambers with mayor and council during these meetings. And it's become a bit of a norm for staff and mayor and council to introduce themselves with pronouns.
Mm.
And it's almost become part of the protocol now, which is really
Neat.
interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just the impact of that, from that like high leadership space trickling down to staff. It was a couple staff that started doing it, and now it's become sort of the thing. That's really cool to see. I think that's been one of the most impactful, the biggest shifts in terms of interaction.
Mm.
But I know personally, I've had interactions with staff. Like I said, not everyone's going to be on board. Some folks, have come to speak to me about, they're not feeling comfortable with the rainbow flags, and we have conversation
Mm.
about that, and that's okay. And then in meetings, they'll use they them pronouns for me, and it's
Mm.
just this like
Wow.
really beautiful thing where I've talked to them about it, and said, well, I want to be respectful. And so even with people who you might not expect, if they're not on board with
Yeah.
the celebration side of it, there's still those moments of respect and the cultural norm that you're building in the organization, where that is part of the respect.
Yeah.
Um and, and that's been really exciting to see personally. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That people can step up even if they're not wanting to participate in everything, right? That where it really matters, those everyday interactions, those smaller moments, that there is still that respect that's being shown, because for some there is an effort involved in it because it's perhaps a new way of speaking, and so there's this added effort that has to be in the mix for some, and then being able to respect. I think that's really important, and the way that leadership is modeling that for others allows people to step into and see that, one, it's possible, two, that they start to understand the need for it or the value by creating space so that others feel more comfortable to do that, especially if people want to share, of course not, as you said, mentioned, forced by anybody, but that can really create that cultural shift, that there's space for it. especially for trans and non-binary folks, it's hard to find those spaces. And you're like, do I say it now, or do I say it, 5 minutes from now, or never, or, so it's always this difficult calculus. But if a bunch of other folks are doing it, it's like, oh, okay, this is the moment. Cool. And so that's really profound. I also know that you were given your linguistic background, which I think is amazing because that's so important, because a lot of this has to do with language. And
Mm.
I understand that you have at the district have created an inclusive language guide. So I just thought, if you want to, you can speak to that and what you've seen, and what kinds of reactions you've received from that set of guidelines.
Yeah, I think so. We haven't done a huge launch of them. It was a bit of a
Okay.
quiet launch to
Oh,
start, but I think people have really appreciated having that as a resource. So I sometimes get questions about, how to phrase something or what to use, and then we can point people to that resource. And I think one of the important things to remember, and this is where we get sociolinguistically, is that it's a living document
mm,
because, yeah, I'm sorry, folks, but language changes all the
mhm,
time.
mm,
It's constantly changing. And so, right when you think you've got a handle on, the way to talk about things, it's going to shift again because, let's face it, humans are creative and wonderful, and we're always finding new ways to, branch out into new ways of speaking. And it's fascinating, but it does mean that we're in a state of constant learning
mm,
in terms of what terminology to use and how to phrase things, and yeah, recognizing that some language gets pulled into negative spaces and then
mm,
reframed into a negative thing.
mm,
So yeah, just if you are thinking about creating any sort of language guidelines, they're super helpful, really useful, and just making sure that we're connecting with folks who are part of the community, have lived and living experience,
mm.
and making sure that we're keeping up to date with it too, because it is something that will need to be changed as things evolve. But yeah, it's everything from like how to write about something in an email, to how to speak to council, spelling, all of the acronyms and words and phrases that can be really confusing and overwhelming for people,
Mm,
because we live in a binary world where you're either this or that, but there's this whole rainbow of stuff in
mm,
between that,
mm.
when you're in a binary, you have to keep differentiating all of these different rainbow pieces. So trying to help people keep up with that and just giving them the resource to do that. It's a really useful thing, creating inclusive language guidelines.
Sweet. Oh, that's so exciting. And I'm glad you gave that background on language. Often we probably perceive it as locked in and, remaining the same for all time. But you're right. It is, constantly evolving and shifting and adding to. We see that in the language, separate from gender, that the young folks are now, I mean, I feel like an old fogey, but
Yeah,
I'm like, what is this? And I have to like look it up and figure it out. And so I can appreciate how people would want it to be a bit more locked in, so that you can just remember one thing and then it's done. But I like your message about we're constantly learning, and that's okay. There's a beauty to that. There's a necessity to that. So, like you said,
mm,
we're not overlooking people, especially non-binary folks or people beyond the gender binary, in the language that we use, and that's just everywhere. It's very subtle sometimes, like even opposite sex or opposite gender just has a
yeah.
connotation of only two, right? So yeah,
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, if you accept that stance of things changing all the time and being in a state of constant learning, then of course we're gonna make mistakes.
oh,
I mean, I'm gonna make mistakes, because things change and you aren't always able to keep up. So if
yeah,
we can accept that that is happening and that we're going to make mistakes, it's not the end of the world to make a
no,
mistake. It's okay. We can
that's so true.
repair and continue.
Absolutely. That's so true. And I think sometimes people think, okay, I'm okay if language is changing, but I want the data download. I want to like be updated like a computer and everything is given to me right away and we're 100% accurate and dialed, right? And you're right, it doesn't work like that. It's more through connections that we share updates, that we learn. I might not get all those updates, and somebody else will help me, and I might be able to help someone else if I know more about what's happening in a certain pocket, right? And so it's kind of through kind of a relational approach that we, get up to speed on things. And so I think I like the message of we can just kind of relax into not knowing everything. We'll get the update when we do. Maybe we can do a little extra work on our own too, right? To stay up to date. And certainly guidelines like the one that you've produced with the district can help too, where it's like a source that gets updated, but that, has some kind of overview of the things that we want to pay attention to and speak to in a respectful and inclusive way. So I think that's fantastic and always a really important thing for organizations to consider. Kind of with the language guide, we've started to dip our toe into some of the structural or systemic side of things, documents or resources, even procedures and systems, spaces like washrooms and change rooms. All of these
Mm.
have gender sometimes or very often baked into them. And I'm sure you're no stranger to that. And so I'm thinking about inclusive spaces in particular. And I know we were just talking kind of earlier in the episode about washrooms and how those can be tricky spaces where folks have a variety of different perspectives on how those should be organized and who should be included and who isn't. And so I would wonder if you, from your journey at the district or even beyond, kind of what you've seen and what kind of insights you've found along the way, and anything you want to share from like a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, washrooms are contested,
Mm-hmm.
tricky spaces, like you said. Everyone needs to use them.
Yep.
And it's taboo, so we don't talk about them, but I'm known as the washroom person.
Okay.
I kind of always have been a washroom person
Right.
all
Right.
the way back to my PhD. I have a little story of part of my work, doing ethnography of part of my PhD. I ended up building some compostable toilets at a
Oh,
festival, and so I
nice.
became known as the toilet person, and here I am, washrooms again. My work phone is just full of photos of toilets because I'm doing audits all the time.
Uh,
Um, and yeah, I mean, washrooms are uh, there's so much opportunity in
mm,
washrooms too, though, if you look at it from a gender inclusive lens and accessibility lens,
mm,
which is something that we're trying to do, is kind of combine those two lenses together and find out what's going to work for everyone in that like sort of universal design sense.
mm, mhm.
Um, and yeah, I kind of make a joke about washrooms because it's that subject that you can make jokes about it and just
Yeah,
kind of lighten it up a little bit.
totally.
I love a good washroom tour. I love
Uh-huh.
to take people and show them great washrooms. Um, but I think in terms of strategy, because they're contested, because it's this sort of taboo subject,
Mm,
I think people, it's a big fear, and I
mm,
think one of the fears of the change in those spaces is that people are going to lose privacy. And
mm,
one thing that I learned in working with you, which really kind of shifted things for me, and I know has shifted things for other people, is that a good washroom is designed to be
mm.
a good washroom so that there's privacy for everyone. So, reassuring people that we're not just going to go around to multi stall gendered washrooms and switch out the signs.
Mm.
You are not going to have to go in there and like see your boss doing their business in the urinal right beside you. Like, that is not good for anybody.
Huh.
And that actually, when we're talking about changing washrooms, we're talking about actual structural changes. So, like taking out walls, doing renovations,
Yeah.
making sure that everyone has privacy and comfort, and feels safe. And there's a difference between feeling, like uncomfortable or nervous and feeling unsafe. So also
Mm,
recognizing that as well, that a well-designed washroom is going to be really great, but it's going to take a bit of time for people to get used to that new norm of
yeah.
using that space. Um, I think that the other thing that's been a big realization is that you don't have to change everything all at once as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
That there are small shifts that can happen. So, working with you again, we had that sort of list of like easy changes, quick fixes, and then
Mm,
the more substantial things. And so, yeah, you can do some really despite washrooms being designed
mhm.
well, you can also have some really sort of quick shifts. So if you've got a universal washroom or a single stall washroom that's gendered, you can
Right.
move that over to a gender neutral space. And that's pretty easy to do. Um, and again, if you don't do everything overnight, if you're doing a couple things, it's going to increase inclusivity and make things a little bit better for people. So
Mhm.
just, taking that step is a big thing.
Mm,
Um, the other thing I'll say about washrooms is don't forget, in spaces that families use or kids,
mm,
so elementary schools, those kinds of places, making sure you're thinking about gender neutral spaces there as well, because
mm,
we've got lots of young kids who are coming out as their authentic
mm,
selves in elementary school, which is a really wonderful indication that we're creating
mm.
safe spaces for our kids.
Right.
And so we need to now keep up with the structural changes there. So if anyone's in an organization that supports families, recreation centers, schools, those kinds of places, yeah, don't forget about gender neutral washrooms and accessible washrooms in those spaces as well. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, such a good point. Because oftentimes those additional spaces are missing, right? Because of the focus on men's and women's spaces, and we've in society gotten used to that type of structure, but don't realize that that doesn't include everyone. Not everyone um, wants to go or needs to go into a men's or a women's facility, right? So having those additional options are critical. And of course, not just for trans and non-binary folks, we know that the benefits extend far beyond that, for people in mobility devices, or for people with care aids, or families of different genders. It's just there's so many people that are served with that type of facility, whether it's single unit and has ample space, or it's multi-stall. And so it's exciting to see that you all have kind of taken the steps to help, to not rush forward too quickly, but enough so people can have an experience and then realize, oh, actually, it wasn't that big of a deal. I thought it might be really scary, but actually, now that I am using them, I'm actually enjoying them. That's often the shift that we hear in people's experiences of all gender multi stall spaces, that initial fear and then excitement, and like, oh, I can go with my friends and we don't have to split ways. you know and my non-binary friend doesn't have to scramble. So it's really exciting to help people take those steps. And again, choice among options is really helpful. But yeah, it's cool
And I
to.
will say, just as a parent,
Mm,
if you have parents of different genders, you can both
mm,
go into the space and support
mm,
your kids.
yeah.
When you've got one in a change table, and like it's just yeah, there's benefits well beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's helpful, but you're right that that privacy piece is really key. That it is not a swap of signage, which some organizations initially want to go that direction because it seems quick and easy. Um, but if no other structural changes are made, then there's a lot more hesitation, nervousness, and even kind of using the washrooms like they've always used them. So it doesn't actually materially change much, and it doesn't create that inclusion that's so necessary. So that's great to hear that there have been some structural changes to washrooms to help expand the options. One other area, just in terms of getting close to the end of the episode, there's one other aspect that I just wanted to get your insights in terms of. There's helping and supporting trans and non-binary employees in the district, and helping with a set of like a toolkit that can help folks that want to be supportive but may not necessarily know how to do that. And so, just wanted to get your sense of kind of the insights that you've gleaned from the process of developing that kind of toolkit, and any tips and advice you have to folks, to organizations that are considering that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the process right now of developing it, and I think for me it was kind of a logical next step.
Mm,
We've worked with our teams to understand gender diversity, and now we needed that sort of structural support piece, because, as you said, people want to do the right thing, but they just don't know what to do.
mm,
And even trans and non-binary folks don't always know what to do,
yeah,
right?
fair.
So having some sort of structure is really helpful.
Mm,
Um, and so, yeah, we're working to bring that to our supervisors and managers. We've been doing a lot of work with our leadership team on, psychological safety
mm,
and conflict resolution. And so this seems like a really great sort of next step in supporting all of that work as well.
mm,
Um, and I think the important thing to note is that, when you're creating toolkits or guidelines or policies,
right.
um, that you need to understand it across the whole system.
Mm,
So, like, we're all in the soup. If you've got a really great inclusive toolkit here supporting trans and non-binary folks, you don't want to have something that's like actually sending the wrong message over here.
mm,
So one thing that we're working on now is creating a framework so that we can review all of our policies.
mm,
Some of our policies are quite old and kind of cute, because it was from a time when this town was much smaller and I think
okay.
everyone knew everyone. Um, but yeah, just reviewing all of that and making sure, like, are you using gender neutral language in your
Mm,
policies, and sort of creating that consistency across, and then also embedding and like referencing across.
mm,
So if you have like a staff orientation document, making sure that, or a manager's orientation, new manager training, making sure you're bringing in all of those pieces so that people know where to find them.
mm,
And I think also, um, making sure that it's accessible for as many people as possible. So
right.
some people love to read a document, they love to read a policy, and we'll
Mm,
get right into it. That's great. Doesn't work for everybody. Some people want to do a training.
yeah.
Some people want to have a conversation with their manager about it.
Mm,
And so bringing that accessibility lens into this work as well, thinking about like how can we make it show up in different places for people.
mm,
Um, and one thing that I find myself saying all the time is like, choose your own adventure. Let people
mm,
choose their own adventure. Just give them a diversity of options.
yeah.
If they want to use that bathroom, that's great. If they want to use that one, that's great. If they want to read the policy,
Mm,
if they want to have a conversation, just making it available to people in different ways so that, we all approach things differently because of different reasons. And
right.
I think that's one way to kind of get that broad uptake as well.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. That's such a good point that, we all learn in different ways. We already know that, especially within educational context. Usually there's different learning styles. And so obviously that also shows up for adults too, right? And folks, maybe at different parts of their inclusion journey on gender diversity. So we'll need different points of entry for that. And so, yeah, it's great that you're thinking about that, and making that available to folks. And having a toolkit is helpful, But that's not the end of the story, because of course it needs to come to life as well, and be living, breathing throughout the organization. So it's a good starting point for that. So that's great to hear that that's underway, and will be something helpful for folks, employees. One last question I had was just to get a bit of a better understanding of what it's like to be a non-binary employee of, not necessarily just the district. I'm sure you've worked at other places as well. So just getting a sense of what that's like. And, kind of the day to day, and anything that you've encountered that is either challenging, or maybe on the other side has brought you a lot of joy and been really wonderful. So just curious what that's like for you.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that understood my identity later in life. So I'm an elder millennial, and when I grew up, non-binary wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Trans was barely, I even barely knew what trans, who trans people were. I felt it was a very sheltered existence a little bit. So this has been a bit new for me. So this experience of creating a safe space has become very personal as well.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a child who is gender diverse, and so adding all of those pieces in, I think overall it's been a really fantastic experience because yeah, there may have been challenges,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I have such a wonderful team of coworkers that I feel so safe with because we've been able to be vulnerable with each other
Right.
because we all come from different spaces and different identities, and we've been building those relationships over a long time and building those stories with each other, um, to the point where when it was my time to come out and I knew it was time, and I came out to my team, I had nothing but support.
Wow.
It was really, really wonderful.
Mm.
And so I kind of went through the process myself and then thought, it would be really helpful to have a toolkit for people to do this as well.
Right.
So yeah, I have to say it's been really respectful and wonderful.
Mm.
Also, being deaf, it's helpful because if anyone says anything, I usually don't hear it.
Oh no. I mean, yay, but also like.
I don't hear the underhand comments or like the whispers. So
Mm.
that's really great.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I've had a really wonderful experience. And I know things are changing. Things are moving forward despite all the stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
background.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in a lot of our spaces things are moving forward, and so I feel actually really positive and optimistic that the arc of life bends towards justice, and we have the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives and support our community in a really tangible way, working in local government and other organizations. So if you're doing this work in your organization, like it's a really wonderful thing to be able to make things a little bit easier for people and a little bit nicer. I think it's just that's what keeps me going as well.
Mm. Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And it really does make a huge difference when people, whether they're prepared or not, are so open when somebody comes forward like yourself at work, and shares more about themselves, and that can really help people grow to be like closer to one another in ways that show up in beautiful, wonderful ways at work. So I'm glad that happened. And of course you also, you know uh, but it could be kind of team specific, so just making sure that can be expanded past, and having something more structured in place to help folks, especially if this is maybe a new topic for them and they don't know how to show up, right? So that's great. And I'm always very encouraged to hear those stories, because it's really important that we support one another, whether it's on gender diversity or more broadly. So that's fantastic to hear. Well, thank you so much for coming on this episode, and sharing a bit about the journey that you've gone and led at the District of Squamish, and then also sharing a bit of your own personal story as well. It's always really fantastic that we can hear a little bit more from like what it's like in lived experience. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and hopefully stay dry, and we'll talk later. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kai. It was an honor to join in, and thanks for having me join. Yeah, love the podcast. You've got a deaf fan over here.
Ooh, yay! Awesome. I love it.
um, yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day too, and maybe we'll get a break in the rain for a little walk soon.
Absolutely. Well, bye for now. Thank you.
Bye.